Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Just Keep Parenting. Glad you could join us again. Yeah, we're happy you're here. I've talked to a few people this week who have been grateful, and every time I think, maybe we're not going to do this anymore, then somebody finds me and says, oh my gosh, that last video, or I found a video that just is what I needed. So we're going to continue. Last week we talked a little bit about emotion coaching, right? What we see, what we feel, and what we hear, right? And how we help with that. And we talked about empathy having two sides, right? The cognitive piece and the emotional piece. So today we're going to delve a little bit more into reflecting back, right? We know that emotional coaching, as we help our children who are struggling with those emotions. I had a situation this week, and I'm wearing a wristband because of it, because when they can't get control of their emotions, right, then they tend to physically reach out, right? And so as we get better at reflecting back what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and what we're feeling, then the child feels understood and loved and heard, right? Not always does it go as planned, as parenting and teaching will attest to, right? But as we use empathy, right, our intent is critical, right? If we use it to manipulate the child, right, which sometimes we float into that part of our brain, and our tone of voice will typically betray us, right? Will betray the motives that we have behind it. I loved in the book, she said, I thought, I felt this before, right? She says, I once heard a frustrated parent say, I know it's hard to leave. Now go get in the car. Right. And she talks about how that attempt at empathy was aimed at her getting her child into the car. Right. It did not help the situation. And we've been there, right, many a times. So we have to remember that empathy comes from the power of acceptance. Right. It's not a manipulation strategy. And in order to help, we've got to accept where the child is, so we can facilitate their willingness to change, right? So as we think about acceptance, the power of acceptance, it's love and compassion in action. So that's what we're going to talk about today, right? So what we see, right? Reflecting back what we see. As we do that, as we reflect back what we see, we can help children become calm enough to begin talking about what happened, right? The little situation that I had this week, as I brought her out, she just enveloped me in this big love, and she put her head right here into my neck and just cried. And so we were being able to talk about what just happened, right? And she was able to become calm enough, and I was able to say, let's breathe together, sweetie. And when they're close enough that they can feel you breathe, right, then that helps them to breathe as well. And so as we reflect back what we see, right, and say, oh, your body, there again, last week I talked about my friend from Roseville who she was masterful at being able to say, your arms are folded like this and your eyebrows are scrunched. I can tell you're really feeling bad. You must maybe feel a little angry. Are you feeling a little angry, right? And when they ask them that, they're like, I don't know what I'm feeling, right? So as we reflect back, rather than asking them, until they get out of their brainstem and back up to their thinking brain, right? So talk about an experience, right, with them as you are reflecting back what you see. She gives a really great example. You pulled your arm back just like this, and she demonstrates it, when I reached out to touch your shoulder. Jake looked up and made eye contact with his mom for the first time since he'd entered the house. At that point, she further reflected back what she saw. You came in stomping your feet, your face looked strained, and you threw your backpack so hard the chair fell. Something terrible must have happened at school. There again, by reflecting back what she saw, Mom helped Jake become calm enough to begin talking about this upsetting experience. And that's the same thing that happened with me. As she cuddled in and tried to calm down, we were able to talk about what had just happened, right? So we move on to what we feel, right? As we reflect back what we feel. And children are often relying on unproductive strategies. We've seen it, we've felt it, right? To handle those emotions because they weren't born knowing how to handle emotions, right? And if sometimes the adults in their life don't handle their emotions very maturely, then we're setting that example or modeling that for them, right? So the children attempt to get us to feel how they're feeling, right? Because they don't know how to do it any other way. So as they're trying to communicate that internal state that they're feeling, they're trying to get us to feel the same way, right? So if you've got a kid that's kicking and screaming, there's something going on and they want us to feel the same way. So as we're trying to reflect what we feel, right, we try to reflect back what their body language is saying, right, instead of relying too much on their words, because their words sometimes don't make a lot of sense. I hate you. I hate it when this happens. I mean, there's a lot of flying words that come out of their mouth, and they can be misleading, right? Even today, right? How are you? Oh, I'm fine. Right? Totally misleading, because the body language with adults is like, oh, I'm fine. No, you're not. Right? And so we have to start to think about, okay, what is their body language telling us, right? When we're at a loss to understand what they're feeling, we reflect on our own feelings, right? That I'm fine thing. So what are the feelings underneath the words that reflect back, right? So you seem angry, you seem sad, you sound sad, you seem really excited, right? Not you are really excited, but that seeming piece, right? That sounding piece helps us not to put words in their mouth, but helps us to there again reflect back what we're feeling based on the body language that we're seeing, right? So there's some mistakes that we sometimes make as adults as we're doing this with children, right? Because reflecting is increasing awareness. That's why we do it, right? As I work with my teachers and I'm trying to get them to reflect back on their teaching, when I say to them, so how'd it go today? Oh, it went great. Okay. Why did it go great? Right? Or they'll say, oh gosh, that was the worst lesson ever. And I'm like, okay, talk to me about why, right? I like to have them talk about the things that went well first, and then we can get to the things that we can change. But reflecting is to increase our awareness. And sometimes I have teachers that come in and they nail it. They are good reflectors. And sometimes I have teachers come in and are like, oh gosh, that lesson did not go great. And so we have to work on that reflecting process, right? Because it really is a process, and some people do it well, and some people have to be taught, just like kids have to be taught how to tell us what they're feeling rather than show us. So when we question children, why are you angry? Why are you acting like that? We're not reflecting feelings. Because questions, as we talked about before, questions ask others to think rather than to feel, right? And sometimes when we're in that brainstem, we're not thinking, right? We're fighting and we're flighting, right? And so in order for us to get back up here, this is the thinking brain. So how do we get them, right? Sometimes when they grow up, they can't tell the difference between thinking and feeling because we continue to ask them, why are you doing that? Why did you do that? I don't know. Right? You're sad, aren't you? Why are you angry? Right? And so those are some of the mistakes that we ask them when they're in that thinking brain and we're trying to reflect feelings. And so we want them to think and not, want them to feel and not think, right? And so we also don't want to sound all-knowing, right? Reflections are tentative and correctable, right? So leaving room for responses or correction. You must be feeling sad. I know you're angry. You're angry, right? So that's me being all-knowing. This is what I'm seeing, right? So if we notice feelings without the intent of altering them, right? So that we feel more comfortable, right? Empathy is not a tool to eliminate children's feelings, right? It's a process to help them recognize and understand their feelings. So that notice feelings with the intent of altering them is another mistake that we sometimes make. They don't need to be fixed, right? They're not wrong. Feelings are not wrong. They're not dangerous. They're a part of us, right? Helping us grow and learn. I was just actually just listening to one of our secretaries who was trying to help a child, and the child started crying because they wanted their mother. It was a toddler, and she said, "Oh, it's okay, right?" And that's one of the mistakes that I used to make quite often, right? When kids were don't cry, it's okay, right? And now I just acknowledge it. I'm like, I'm sure you're sad, right? I'm sure you must be sad because your mom is just leaving, right? And she's going to be back in a minute, but we can read a book, right? So then we talk about how to get them out of that, but we acknowledge that they are sad. They want to be with their mom, right? Sometimes when the kids say to me, I just miss my mom, I'm like, I know, I do too, honey. I miss my mom all the time. Every day I miss my mom, right? And then like, Miss Dory, is your mom here? I'm like, nope, she died. She died a long time ago, but I still miss her. So we have this little connection, right? When we come together, we feel we're reflecting rather than just trying to push it off. They're a part of us, helping us grow and learn. And then the last thing is we're reflecting back what we hear, right? So we listen closely and then we summarize the essence of what we think they've communicated to us, right? And the reflections are evidence that they've been listened to, they've been understood, right? And so even though it may be the hardest thing, and even though we don't have time, it's like, get in the car, right? But we can do it better in the long term, right? Sometimes we think about, extrinsic versus intrinsic, and you can go back and look at some of those videos, but, extrinsic is quick, right? Here's a piece of candy, get in the car. But what are we doing long term for them, right? So we want to think about that long term. We want to think about intrinsic motivation. We want to think about how we reflect, right? If we take the time to reflect with children now, they're going to be better off in the end because they're going to understand how to reflect and understand that they can work through these feelings. Feelings are good, right? But we've got to figure out how to make them productive rather than unproductive, right? So there's a story in here where she talks about, which I just absolutely love. She said, a child might, let's see, your reflections offer tangible evidence to your child that you have listened to her and with empathy and have understood her perspective. And then she says, a child might say, you can't make me shower. How many times have we heard that? You can't make me, right? It's my body. You could reflect back the following to the child. You want me to know that it's important for you to be responsible for taking care of your own body. The child might respond, yeah. And then you can begin to solve the problem by offering consequences or whatever skill you choose, right? In this situation, you could say, to take care of your body, you need to shower every day. When will you be taking care of your body today? Right? So you've kind of redirected, but you've kind of brought it back to that. You can be responsible, you can do this, but in order to be responsible, this is what you need to do. So when are you going to do this? It's talking about back in a few videos ago when we talked about, if your job is to take the garbage out, right? Does it really matter when they take the garbage out, right? Sometimes we have control issues, and sometimes we want them to take that dang garbage out right now, right? When in reality, in the big picture, we have to step back and say, you know what, sweetie, you can take the garbage out before school or after school. That's totally up to you. It still has a little bit of room in it, so we could probably use it a little bit more. If it's full, be able to say, so you can take it out before you go to school or right after breakfast, right? Because it's full, it needs to be taken out. You can't wait till after school because it's too full, right? And so helping them understand your thought process, because sometimes we just expect kids to understand what's going on in our brain, and they don't, just the same way we don't understand what's going on in their brain. Sometimes I wish for a little crystal ball right here, right? So that's what we're going to work on today, my friends, is reflecting back what we see, reflecting back what we feel, and reflecting back what we hear, so that then we can get them to a calm place, so that then they can better understand and have productive outcomes rather than unproductive outcomes. Good luck this week. Just carry on. Just keep parenting.